Welcome back to Enigmatic Echoez. I'm your host, Jazz. If you're new here, welcome. If you're returning, thank you for spending part of your day or night with me. Tonight we're headed into the mountains of Appalachia for one of the West Virginia's most enduring ghost stories, a tale involving a mysterious woman, a deadly fire, a passing train, and screams so terrifying that people claim they still echo through the darkness today. Now, before we begin, a quick reminder. This story is folklore. While elements of the legend are tied to real places and railroad history, there is no definitive evidence that a woman named Jenny died exactly as the story describes. But sometimes the stories that survive aren't necessarily the ones that are true. They're the ones people refuse to forget. And trust me, if someone introduced me as the screaming guy nearly 200 years after I died, I'd probably haunt people too. So dim the lights, settle in, and let's explore the legend of Screaming Jenny. Now our story takes us to Harpers Ferry, nestled where the Potomac and the Shenandoah rivers meet. Harpers Ferry is one of the most historic towns in Appalachia. Today it's known for its beautiful scenery, Civil War history, and preserved 19th century streets. But in the 19th century, it was also becoming an important transportation hub. By the late 1830s, the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, commonly known as the B&O Railroad, had reached Harpers Ferry, connecting the town to one of America's earliest major rail networks. Railroad activity quickly became part of daily life. Trains moved through town, workers arrived looking for opportunity. Trackside structures and small settlements appeared around the growing rail lines. It is within this setting that the legend of Screaming Jenny is usually placed. However, historians have never verified exactly when, or even if the events behind the story actually occurred. And that's important to remember, because while Harpers Ferry is very real, Screaming Jenny lives primarily in folklore. According to the legend, Jenny was a poor woman who lived along near the railroad tracks. Some versions describe her as homeless. Others portray her as a widow struggling to survive. Most versions agree on one thing: life was difficult, especially during the cold Appalachian winters. One chilly evening, Jenny sat inside her small shelter. A fire crackled nearby. It wasn't much, just enough warmth to keep the cold at bay. According to the story, she was preparing a simple meal while trying to stay warm. Then disaster struck. A spark escaped from the fire, a tiny ember. The sort of thing most people wouldn't even notice. But this one landed on Jenny's clothing. At first she didn't realize what had happened. Then she smelled smoke. She looked down and suddenly her dress was burning. Panic took over. She tried to extinguish the flames. Some versions say she threw her food onto the fire. Another claims she attempted to smother the flames with her hands. Nothing worked. Her clothing became engulfed, and Jenny did the only thing she could think to do. She ran. Imagine the scene. No modern emergency services, no ambulance, no cell phone, no nearby hospital. Just darkness, cold air, and a terrified woman consumed by flames. According to the legend, Jenny ran toward the railroad station, hoping someone could help her. As she ran, she screamed. Not ordinary screams, the kind that freeze people in place, the kind that linger in your memory long after they've stopped. The legend says her cries echoed across the valley. People heard them, but nobody reached her in time. Then tragedy struck. Jenny stumbled onto the railroad tracks, and at nearly the same moment, a train rounded the bend. The engineer reportedly saw a strange glowing shape ahead. At first, he couldn't make sense of it. Then realization hit. It was a person, a burning person. He immediately applied the brakes. But trains don't stop instantly. Not today. And certainly not in the late 1830s or 1840s, when the legend is most commonly set. The locomotive struck Jenny, and just like that, the screaming stopped. According to local versions of the story, Jenny was buried nearby, and the town slowly attempted to move on. But the story wasn't finished. Not even close. Weeks later, another train reportedly approached the same section of track. Another engineer, another night, and another terrifying sight. Ahead of the locomotive was a woman engulfed in flames, running, screaming, desperately waving her arms. The engineer reacted immediately. He slammed the brakes. The train rolled forward and struck her, or so he thought. When he climbed down to investigate, there was nobody there. No body, no footprints, no evidence, nothing. The story spread quickly among railroad workers. Then another sighting was reported, and another. Soon, workers began telling stories of a burning woman appearing along the tracks. Sometimes she ran directly ahead of trains. Sometimes she stood beside them. Sometimes only the screams were heard. The legend of Screaming Jenny had begun. Over the years, countless stories emerged. Whether they're true is impossible to prove, but they became part of the legend. Some railroad workers claimed they saw a glowing figure running alongside moving trains. Others described hearing screams carried on the wind despite there being nobody nearby. Several stories described strange flashes of orange light appearing near the tracks. Witnesses would investigate, only to find empty darkness. One recurring detail appears again and again: the feeling of sadness. Not fear, not danger, sadness. People often describe an overwhelming sense of grief before hearing the screams, almost as if whatever remains of Jenny isn't trying to terrify anyone, almost as if she's still reliving her final moments, searching for help, searching for someone who never arrived, and repeating that desperate run forever. As the decades passed, the legend evolved. One of the more modern stories involves a photographer exploring an area associated with the legend. According to the account, the photographer discovered an isolated phone booth late at night. Then the phone rang, which would already be unsettling, but curiosity won. The photographer approached and reportedly discovered the booth wasn't connected to anything. No working line, no visible service, nothing. Yet the ringing continued. The witness fled, later connecting the experience to the legend of Screaming Jenny. Could there be another explanation? Of course, there usually is, but ghost stories thrive in places where ordinary explanations feel just a little too ordinary. Like many Appalachian ghost stories, Screaming Jenny exists in more than one form, and that's where our second version comes in. In some tellings, Jenny isn't necessarily poor. Instead, she is described simply as a young woman traveling near the railroad. The details vary, but the outcome remains the same. A fire, a desperate attempt to escape, and a fatal encounter with a train. Another version claims Jenny appears only on specific nights, particularly around the anniversary of her death. Witnesses report hearing screams from the darkness, then seeing brief flashes of fire, only for both to disappear moments later. It's impossible to know which version came first, but both survive because they capture the same haunting image: a woman trapped between life and death, forever running, forever screaming, forever hoping someone will save her. There are certainly scarier ghosts in American folklore. Ghosts that attack people, ghosts that curse people, ghosts that drag unsuspected victims into rivers or forests. But Screaming Jenny endures because her story feels human. At its core, this isn't a story about a monster. It's a story about tragedy, about being alone, about needing help, about fear. And perhaps that's why the legend survived for generations. Folklore often serves as a warning. Stay away from dangerous railroad tracks. Respect fire. Be cautious after dark. Stories teach lessons, and the ones attached to strong emotions tend to survive the longest. Whether Jenny was real may never be known, but the legend certainly is, and for nearly 2 centuries it has remained one of Appalachia's most famous ghost stories. So what do you think? Was Screaming Jenny inspired by a real tragedy that became exaggerated over time? A cautionary tale designed to keep people away from dangerous railroad tracks? Or is there truly something wandering after dark? Maybe the screams are imagination. Maybe they're echoes carried through valley. Or maybe, on certain cold Appalachian nights, a woman still runs through the darkness, wrapped in flames, calling for help, reliving the worst moment of her life, again and again and again. Thank you for joining me for another journey into the strange and unexplained. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to follow, subscribe, and share Enigmatic Echoez wherever you're listening. You can also find us on YouTube and Instagram for episode visuals, updates, and additional content. And remember, if you ever hear screaming near abandoned railroad tracks at 2 a.m, the correct response is not, I should investigate that. That's how people end up becoming the sequel. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and keep listening for the echoes. Good night.